Get our prayer.
He's here. I talked to him. Yeah, he's right there. Good. Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting of December 17th. We welcome all that have joined us tonight and wish you a Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season. Let's do a little roll call to make sure that we can talk business tonight, starting with Councilwoman Meekum at the end.
Meekum present.
Inns present.
Fillmore here.
Ivy present.
McEwen here.
Let it be noted that all 5 city council members are present. Welcome everyone, come on in, get take a seat. So we have in the past been blessed and fortunate to have various organizations, religious organizations within the community give our prayer and our thought. And tonight we have Lee Hawks with us to give our prayer thought. And so Lee, come on up to one of these microphones and welcome and thanks for being here.
Our Heavenly Father, we bow our heads this evening at the beginning of this City Council meeting, express our gratitude to Thee and seek Thy Spirit to guide the affairs of this meeting. We're very thankful, Heavenly Father, for this great land of liberty, of America, of the United States. And we're mindful of the troublesome times in which we live. So we pray for our leaders that they may find resolutions to problems, and that they may preserve the freedom and the liberty that we enjoy in this great land. We're thankful for the fair city of Centerville. We're thankful for our mayor and our city council and the employees who devote their time here to organizing and carrying out the work of our city. We're grateful for the many good people who reside here in our community, our citizens. And we pray for them that they may seek to help their neighbors. They may do the small things which are important to bring comfort and safety and pleasantness to our city. Now, Heavenly Father, inasmuch as it's Christmas season, the time when we celebrate the birth of Thy beloved Son, we pray that we may, as citizens and community leaders, lead our lives that we might be grateful for the great sacrifice of our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, and for the many blessings that we enjoy in this free land, all of which we pray in the name of the Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Lee. We have a guest here tonight also to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance, Mike Hepworth. Want to come up forward and do that?
Say again.
Turn it over to you.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lee, and thanks, Mike. We've had the Bridge Church participate before, and our Episcopalian Church, and I'd reached out to the LDS churches, and they sent you guys over. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, let's go to the start of our council meeting. The first thing we have is an open session. This is a time that anybody that is here to comment on any issue that might be on their mind. We would like you to keep your comments to 2 or 3 minutes, and so just come up to one of these microphones and introduce yourself and where you're from. So that open session is now available for any of you who'd like to do that.
My name is Ernie Gardner, and I'm from Clinton City, and I'm also here representing the Centerville Small Arms Range. And I'd like to thank the city, first of all, for letting us have the opportunity to have a place to exercise our Second Amendment freedoms. Thank you for your willingness to help out, and thanks for the program that you guys have implemented, which is the lead abatement program. And what I'd like to do is see if I could ask for a little bit of leniency on the amount that we paid for escrow. Currently, it's $800 a year. We've got about $5,000 in there, and I'd like you to consider maybe reducing that by half so that we have a little bit more money to make improvements on the range and continue the program up there. That's all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Ernie. Anyone else for the open session? If not, we will close the open session. We'll move on to other business of the meeting. The first item of business we have is every year we're required to have an annual audit of our financial reports to be done, and so this is the audit report for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019. Marcus, are you coming forth to do that?
Yeah, we've got the auditors are hitting verdict. Jeff is the manager of the audit, and he's on a conference call right here, so he'll be able to present the audit and give the council see if they have any questions related to how the audit went. Are you there, Jeff?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Marcus.
Okay.
We're not going to turn you on to hear, Jeff. It's a lot louder.
Let me know when you're ready for me to start.
Yep, we're just turning up the volume.
That's better. Speak, Jeff. Let's see if we can hear you.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Take it away.
Now.
All right, yep, you're up, Jeff.
Okay. Well, my name is Jeff Bauer with Hinton Burdick. I am the audit manager and in charge of the Centerville audit. I've been working with the city for a number of years now. I work with Mike Spilker, who is the audit partner over the engagement. And I will have to excuse Mike tonight. He had a scheduling conflict and couldn't make it to the phone conference and presentation. First, we'd just like to thank the city for the opportunity to perform the annual financial audit. It's been great to work with each staff member, as well as Marcus at Kennington and Christensen. They've been great to work with again this year. I'm not very long-winded, so I've prepared a short presentation or some slides to go over the most important parts of the audit that we performed. If you look on page 2 of my handout, it boils down to the results of an audit for financial statements in the state of Utah are summarized in 3 different reports that we issue as part of our audit, as well as a letter of finding and recommendations. As you can see on this page, we have these 3 different reports. The first is the independent auditor's report, which if you look at the financial statements on pages 10 and 11 is reported there. This is the overall opinion and report on the audit that we perform. And as we went through our procedures and reviewed the accounts and financial activity, we issued a clean or unmodified opinion. And to paraphrase the bulk of that 2-page report, in our opinion, the financial statements of Centerville City are presented fairly in all material respects as of June 30th, 2019. The second report that we are engaged to issue is a report on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance. That's found on page 110. This goes over if there are any significant issues that the council would need to be aware of as we performed our audit. And we did not note any items that needed to be brought to your attention. The third report is called the Report on Compliance in accordance with the State Compliance Audit Guide. This is commonly just referred to as state compliance. We did notice one new item that we have noticed and will bring to your attention a little bit later. And then 2 prior year items have been resolved, which is great, meaning that the city continues to progress and improve and become more compliant with state laws and regulations. All 3 of those reports, again, received a clean or unmodified opinion, which is great for the city. Going to page 3, this is where we talk about the letter that we issue, which is at the end of the financial statements on page 108. Again, we noted no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies during the course of our audit, which was the same as last year, so no major issues there to report to you. Page 4 of my handout here, again, another findings and recommendations letter. This can be found on page 114. Give you a minute to turn to that. This is a letter that's required to mention any issues we might come across. Again, the top half of the report says that there's been no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. As far as compliance goes, this is where the state compliance items come into effect. We did note one instance of noncompliance, which was not a major instance of noncompliance, but it deals with cash management reporting, which is just a report that the city sends to the state every 6 months that just shows the current bank balances of all the cash accounts the city has, and they send that to the state every 6 months. There was just an error on the report, the one report that we looked at, which again was not a major problem, and the city's already come up with a corrective action plan, which can be found on page 115 of the financial statements to get those reports reported correctly in the future. Overall, the city has done a great job during fiscal year 2019 in recording and reporting transactions appropriately, and want to give them and you commendation for the hard work and hours that it takes to run the city and to record and report these things correctly and also be in compliance with the state laws and regulations. The last page of my slide just asks for questions. If there were any that might have come up on those quick slides or pages that I presented to you, or any reports that I have presented to you. Again, everything went really well with the audit. We didn't have very many adjustments to make the accounting records proper, and I think that's all I really had to say, unless you guys have any questions for me specifically.
When you say very many adjustments, any of those adjustments that we need to be concerned about?
No, Mark has prepared all of the proper end-of-year accruals that were required for the financial statement. I believe there was only 2 items that we noticed during our audit, and both of them related to just the timing and when invoices needed to be put into the correct year. The first had to do with a truck that got coded into 2019 when it should have been actually posted into 2020. And then I believe that actually both instances were where they were put into the accounting system timely and correctly. Just the period that they were expensed into was wrong. So they weren't significant. I think in total it was just a few $1,000s. So nothing major there.
Thanks. Further questions from council? Marcus, do you have anything to report?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I think we can let you go, and I'll just go over the highlights of the financial report.
Thank you, Jeff.
Shut up.
Thank you. If any more questions come up while I'm available the rest of the evening, just call me on that extra number you have, Marcus, and I can be happy to answer anything.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, so I'll kind of just go through and hit the highlights on the financial statement for year-end 2019. The city as a whole The total assets increased by about 860,000, which is a 1.4% increase. Total liabilities increased by about 50,000. The total net position of the city as a whole increased about 1.9 million, which is about 3.85%. The net position is made up of three parts. The biggest is the net investment of capital assets. That's the fixed assets of the city, less any debt related to those assets. Another component of net position is the restricted net position, and that's the restricted assets, committed assets. Most of those are related to projects of the city, like road projects or park projects. And then the third part is unrestricted net position. That also increased during the year. It increased by about 725,000. If we break it down to the governmental funds, the ending fund balance in governmental funds was about 4.2 million. 2.9 million of that is restricted or assigned or committed to certain projects, and about 1.3 million of that is unassigned. It's in the general fund, so the city can spend that as needed. The state requires the general fund balance to have between 5 and 25% of the current year revenue as that unassigned fund balance. As of June 30th, 19, we were at 16.7%, so right in the middle. Last year, we were at 14.5%, and at the end of fiscal year 17, it was 8.8%. And that's kind of been one of the city's goals, is to increase that fund balance a little bit. The enterprise funds, the water fund.
Marcus, before you leave that,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
relative to where we are now in general fund balance, cities of similar size, how are we comparing in terms of what we're maintaining?
It's tough to compare city to city just because they have different goals. Some like to run a little more lean, some like to have a little bit more in the general fund. I mean, with Centerville, there's also a transportation fund, and there's $415,000 that's really general fund money that was transferred there last year that wasn't spent. And so, if you put that back in the general fund, it's higher. So it's tough to compare city to city because of how the fund structures are, where several of Centerville's funds could actually be put into the general fund. They've just been broken out because they want to track things separately, just preference of the city. So, I think we're definitely headed in the direction that the city here wanted to increase that. It's about 17%. The highest it can be is 25%. So, not a great answer, but it's just different compared to every city.
It's qualified, so I'm fine with it. So.
Okay, yeah.
What are the components of the $700,000 increase
Let's see.
in unrestricted funds?
Okay, so going back, that's where the $725,000 increase, that's the city as a whole. So where it's mostly just revenues were less than expenses in almost every fund. So it's just the net income of those increase that fund balance. It's still, where that is coming from, the city governmental accounting, you have your governmental funds that are on a modified accrual basis, and then you have your enterprise funds that are on an accrual basis. But then when you take them all together at the government-wide level, it all goes to an accrual basis. And we can go into it in more detail, but it's basically the revenue was higher than the expenses, so it increases the fund balance.
So there's no single component?
What's that?
There was no single component?
No.
When did we get the loan for the park expansion?
The $500,000, that came, right. It was the very beginning. It was.
No, the loan was.
It was last year. It was June of 2018. We got the $500,000 loan. So one payment's been made on that, so it's down to $400,000. But that wouldn't affect the.
That wouldn't have affected the 700?
No.
You're talking about South Davis? was actually the year prior.
Well, that's what I would,
Yeah, and so that
so it was
wouldn't
in
affect the
it
fund
was in,
balance.
it was in fiscal 18?
Right.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the fund balances increase when the revenues are higher than the expenses. And that 725 is accounting all the enterprise funds with all the governmental funds combined together is how that, and that's reported in the statement of net activities and the statement of net position in the financials. But yeah, so it's revenues higher than expenses. And so in the enterprise funds, the water fund had an operating income of about $403,000. It had a increase in net position of about $653,000. You have your operating revenues and expenses, and then you have capital contributions and interest income and interest expense that are on top of that operating income. The drainage fund had operating income of about $393,000, and total net position increased by $438,000. The sanitation fund had operating income of about $42,000, and total net position increase of $37,000, and that was less because of some interest expense related to one of the bonds. The telecom fund, it's really just a pass-through type fund, so you really don't have net income. I mean, you collect from Utopia users that are paying their connection fee over time. You collect from that, and then you remit it to UIA, so there's really no income in that. Major capital asset additions during the year. The Centerville Park was completed by the frontage road. The city started the Island View Park project. The city also had some water distribution system improvements, and then the storm drain system had some improvements. The city bought a dump truck and a couple vehicles. The debt, there was no new debt added in fiscal year 19. There's a revenue bond in the governmental fund that has 2 more years, and it'll be paid off. So it'll be paid off in fiscal year 2021. The note payable that you're referring to earlier has about 4 more years to be paid off. The business type, the water bond, there's about 10 more years to pay that debt off. And you'll notice the net pension liability increased significantly, but that's a different kind of debt. It's not really one that you can just go pay off. That was added to members that are part of the Utah retirement system. It's the Centerville's portion of the unfunded liability of the Utah retirement system. And so that they tell us what the number is, and we have to record it on the financials. But any questions about fixed assets or debt or anything else real? I mean, a lot of the information is in the MD&A in the statistical section in the CAFR. Jake's got printed copies. We've got electronic copy. I think you have that. But if there's any questions, I mean, email or call me or yeah. So.
Further questions, Marcus? Nothing else, Marcus?
No, the audit went great. Thanks to Jake, Brandt, and the accounting staff for all they do. And Hinton Burdick, they do a great job. They audit lots of governmental entities, so that's good to work with them. But thank you, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. It was good to see a findings section that had nothing that said significant next to it, so that's always a plus.
Yeah.
So, public, you were so quiet through that all. You know, you weren't watching a ball game or going to a play or anything, were you? So hopefully it was exciting to you. Just so you know, this is obviously we're required to do this. We're happy to do it. It's transparency in government. This report is then also filed with the state as well too, right? As part of what's called the CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So that's what we do. It's public knowledge. It's out there for you to all see and look at and study on your own as well too. So thanks. All right, let's go to item number 2. This is a item that was tabled from the 12-3 meeting of 2 weeks ago. We have Corey here just to kind of introduce it for us and what's happened in the last couple of weeks. And
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I've been asked to just recap what happened earlier on this. This is an application from Symphony Homes. It involves, I believe, the DeVore property. I'm not sure what it's officially labeled in their trust fund, but it's the property at the end of 400 west of the north end of the city, or our northwest neighborhood. It's right around 17 acres, depending on which documents you look at, but we're somewhere right around 17 acres. The request before you is to change the zoning from agricultural low, which is a single-family area with half-acre minimum lots, to residential low, which is
Did you really mean what you just said?
agricultural low.
Oh, from agriculture.
Yeah, from agricultural low to residential low, which is a gross density of no more than 4 units per acre. If you equate that out, that would be quarter acre for every home, but that also includes any roadways that are built into the system, so it becomes a gross density calculation. You had a report from the staff in the process discussing the Planning Commission's recommendation. The Planning Commission has an affirmative recommendation to approve the rezone. At your last meeting, you conducted the public hearing and you tabled it for this meeting and discussion. As part of that tabling, there was a traffic study presented by the applicant. We received a copy of that traffic study and it's been posted in your reports, so you should have a copy of that. There was also a request from the council to have our city engineer and our police chief take a look at that. I communicated with them. They provided some reports back to you through the email, which has also been attached to your agenda, and they're present tonight to answer any questions on the issue of the traffic study. From that point, I don't know if I have any additional information for you, unless you have questions.
thank you for recapping it, Corey. So what I'd like to do is those new reports that Corey refers to.
Mayor, just one thing I did forget.
Okay, go ahead.
The applicant had contacted me and indicated that they wanted to make a report to you in response with their traffic engineer and their representative, and I did forward the communication to both the city manager and yourself that they have that request.
Okay, thanks. So we do have new reports here with the Symphony traffic study, our city engineer traffic study comments, our police traffic study comments. So let's kind of go in that order for all that are present in council purposes. So Symphony, you want to talk about the traffic study that you did?
Hi, I'm Russ Wilson with Symphony Homes. Over the past couple of weeks, we've submitted our what our engineer is calling a preliminary traffic memo. We actually have our traffic engineer here tonight. He's done some additional analysis, and he would like to present some of his findings, and then he can answer any follow-up questions you may have. We also have our legal counsel here with us that would like to make a presentation and answer any questions as well.
Okay,
So
let's do it.
Traffic engineer first. His name is Paul Peterson.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Paul Peterson with WCEC Engineers. So the initial memo that was done on November 25th, we submitted that to Russ Wilson. I believe that's what has been submitted.
Could you speak up just a little?
I believe that's what's been reviewed already, is the original traffic memo. Since then, Russ asked us to go do a little more evaluation at the site. And so we've collected existing traffic counts, and we've also observed school traffic in the area to try to get an idea of queuing along Main Street, if there's any concerns with queuing or or school traffic or anything like that, that this development might impact. And so I think, has this been passed around? Do you have this copy of this? Okay.
Yes.
So this summarizes the additional information that we collected. Figure 2 is the existing counts. These counts were performed last week. These counts were collected in 3 locations, intersections 1, 2, and 3, which are all along 2025 North. And 2025 North is anticipated to basically carry all the traffic from this development. Those will be the access points for the development. So the numbers in parentheses are the peak hour numbers. The numbers that are not in parentheses are the AM peak hours. So it's divided up between AM peak hour and PM peak hour. The AM peak hour was determined to be from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and the PM peak hour from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And this is basically the 2 busiest hours of the day. Busiest hour in the morning and the busiest hour in the afternoon. Then we took that information, we took the number of homes that are going to be developed. They're estimating 63 homes, and calculated the number of trips that are anticipated to be generated by that development. And trips are defined as the number of vehicles going to and leaving the site. So going in and out. So one in is a trip and one out is also a trip. So both in and out combine to be the number of trips. And figure 3 shows the trips that we anticipate at each intersection. And these are anticipated to be mostly accessing Main Street and accessing the I-15 frontage road. 40% onto the frontage road, 40% onto Main Street. And we did that to kind of show how much traffic can be anticipated to be added to each intersection during the peak hour. So anything outside of the peak hour would be less than these numbers shown here. Yeah, so AM peak hours, we estimate 50 trips in and out total for the AM peak hour. And for the PM peak hour, 65 trips total. And so those are distributed onto each road and then onto the surrounding, onto Main Street and then onto the frontage road. So basically it's residential.
Could you go a little bit more into a little bit of a deeper dive of how that's calculated? So if you have 60 homes, how are you getting to 50 trips in that? I'm not understanding
Okay,
where
yeah.
that
So
number is derived.
you're anticipating that lots of the people who live there aren't going to leave for work or go to school in the morning?
They won't
'Cause they're-
leave for school between 8 and 9. So not everybody works between 8 and 9. Some people might go in early, some people might work later.
So can you lay out a basic formula of how that's calculated?
Yeah, so we use a manual called the Institute of Transportation Engineers, the ITE Trip Generation Manual. And what that is they've done thousands of studies, this Institute of Transportation Engineers all through the country. And they do studies that are specific to residential units and or specific to commercial or shopping centers or whatever the land use might be. And they do all these studies, and then they have those formulas that they've developed that you apply to individual land uses. So in this case, we use single-family homes, and so they'll be on quarter-acre lots. It's a formula that I could share. I don't have it with me, but it's a formula that we use. But
Does that formula take into account the value of the property?
no, single-family homes.
So like if I need a 4-car garage at my $1 million house, that doesn't change it at all?
No.
So it's just residence type, not necessarily value?
Yeah, the classification for this one was single-family detached housing.
How about the area? Is it looking at Davis County or is it?
No, it's a national average.
So I know, and I'm sorry, I'm not prepared, I should have it with me, but Wasatch Front actually came out a few years ago where they had it for Davis County. And I can't remember if it's 13 point something or 16 point something trips per household in this area per day for every home that is added.
Okay. We could look into that. I think the national average is, well, we had 680 trips per day, so the national average would be lower than what that is quoting. 10 times versus the 16 times.
Just sorry to take you off track. Continue. I just wanted to understand that formula because I think that
Okay.
plays into
I have a
a
hard
lot of
time-
the deliberations.
I have a hard time believing there wouldn't be some refinement based on size of home and likely number of vehicles.
That's where I'm at, Bill, too, is single family is a catch-all definition that just across our town represents different things in terms of how many garages there are and how many kid cars and all of that sort of thing. So I'm trying to figure out how coarse of a number this is or how much you can actually dial it in. It sounds pretty coarse as far as you pick a type and then it's access points to what's near it and then that's what's driving the number. I'm just surprised that valuation or number of vehicles on site doesn't really necessarily factor into that. Or maybe it does and I'm misinterpreting that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a national average. It's kind of an industry standard on how these studies are performed. And there's some areas where we'll do an actual specific trip generation for ourselves, like, sounds like Davis County might have one that they have used in the past.
And how current is this data, recognizing that everyone wants to have a bigger, better, and 3-car garage or greater? Are these studies kept current enough to reflect those trends?
Yeah, so they'll update it every few years.
Okay.
But right now it's the 10th edition, which I believe was released in 2018.
Okay. Sounds pretty current.
But they also, I mean, it includes data from 10, 15 years ago, and they constantly watch this data and keep track of it and update the formulas. But there's definitely something that is called the local trip gen
Right.
that can be applied. And
I
if
know,
it's
I
a-
got that from Wasatch Front Regional, if that's where.
And just for clarification, that isn't applied, this is using just the national, not a local modifier?
Yes, this study uses the national.
Okay.
Yours is strictly from the Institution of Transportation Engineers. Okay?
Yeah.
It's not a cross-examination, we're just trying to understand.
No, I
So-
prefer questions rather than, it's easier to answer the questions. So if you have any questions, just whenever, let me know.
Do you have more to continuing on?
The only other thing I was going to say is that Figure 4 adds the current volumes with the projected volumes. And that's the total traffic that will be anticipated at each intersection. And we haven't done it yet, but what we'll do with this is we'll plug it into a program called Synchro. It's a modeling program, and it'll evaluate each turning movements and identify what kind of delays there are and things like that. I think with the volumes where they're at for for the projected volumes, it's going to be hard to show any real impacts to the level of service, or level of service is how well the intersection operates. With the high volumes along Main Street and the frontage road, I anticipate minimal impacts. I haven't done it yet, but it really won't show a lot of change in the level of service. This would not be considered a huge impact at each intersection. And part of the reason for that is the distribution. Vehicles are able to access I-15 frontage road and also Main Street. So all those cars are going 2 directions. We've also assumed that some of these vehicles will go down 400 West. We realize it's not a great north-south road to take, but we've assumed that a few vehicles will use 400 West as well. And then we also observe school traffic in the morning. There is a queuing along Main Street. It's to be expected in that situation with everybody dropping kids off. We didn't see anything that really stood out to us as far as the school traffic goes. The crossing guard was monitoring traffic and letting kids cross. And when she did do that, it would back it up. So, and the backup lasted 4 to 5 minutes, and then it cleared. So that's all I had to summarize. We're going to be taking this memo and converting it into a full traffic study that will summarize these items.
Thank you. Any further questions before we have the next representative come up?
Possibly after staff.
Okay. All right, Symphony, you said you had someone else here? Come on up.
Mayor Wilkinson and members of the City Council, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight, and I want to wish you all Merry Christmas and thank you for making time in busy schedules to be here. My name is Kevin Anderson. I'm a land use attorney, and I'm here tonight to discuss with you some of the issues as I see them relative to this development. I am not here to lecture you on the law. You have a very capable, wise, well-respected city attorney who can counsel you. I'm not here to argue with you about various points or provisions. Instead, my role tonight, as I view it, is just to provide some perspective that hopefully will be helpful to you in the decision that you will be making. I know there are lots of different viewpoints on this issue, but I think one thing that everyone in this room has in common is this: a respect for private property rights. Those rights, as you well know, are bedrock to the Constitution, fundamental guarantees. And even in the development code, or I should rephrase that and say even in the statutes of the state of Utah, in addition to its constitution, there is a provision in the municipal code that counsels the government and establishes rules for municipalities in dealing with regulating property. And one of those provisions touches on the importance of private property rights. And I just want to read this. It's 4 lines. It's found for reference in section 10-9A-102, subparen 2 of the municipal code. And that code sets forth the power and authority of municipalities to regulate property. But then it has provisions in subsections N and O that talk about these should be applied to achieve, and this is the quoted language, fundamental fairness in land use regulation and considerations of surrounding land uses to balance the foregoing purposes, the regulatory powers of municipalities, to balance those purposes with a landowner's private property interests and associated statutory and constitutional guarantees. And so with that background on the importance of private property rights that each one of us values, I'd like to just encapsulate the issue that's before the City Council. As was mentioned earlier by Corey, this property involves approximately 17 acres of property. It is currently in an agricultural holding zone, AL zone, and pursuant to the provisions of the general plan, it is contemplated by the city that this property could be used for RL development upon appropriate application. Much of this property is owned by the DeVore family. You may know this already, but Mrs. DeVore, who recently passed away, passed at the ripe old age of 103 and a half years old. She had 18 children, 16 of whom survived birth, and some of the children, she lived so long that some predeceased her, but there are still, as I understand it, 13 living children, and many are here today. I'd invite you just to stand to be recognized. These are the children and family members of the DeVore family. There are, I'm told, well in excess of 300 descendants of Mabel DeVore. The DeVore family, now with Mabel's passing, desires to have their property developed and to sell their property as developable property. In addition to the interest of the DeVores in this property, Symphony Homes also owns a portion of this property, and I believe it's towards the Main Street side of the property. Is that right? In the center of the property. Symphony Homes has had that property for quite a while and considered coming to the council years ago to subdivide that, but determined that it made more sense to have their property developed in conjunction with the DeVore property. And the reason is that would present a unique opportunity, a synergy, if you will, that would allow an entire strip of property that runs from Main Street on the east to the frontage road on the west. And that size of property, that footprint of property, and that location of property would provide, again, these unique opportunities to develop the property in a way that would deal with some of the issues that have been a problem in other developments, drainage and traffic among them. Because of the east-west flow of drainage, this allows this size of property, in conjunction with the DeVores and Symphony Homes, enables the entire drainage area from Main Street to the frontage road to be dealt with together. And in terms of traffic, this property has sufficient size so that the traffic generated by the roughly 63 homes or so that are anticipated can be diffused over several different access points. So there are actually 3 different access points than if Symphony Homes, for example, had tried to develop homes with just one access point. And so it permits access from Main Street on the east, the street in the middle, 400 West, and then a street further west that would allow not direct access, but indirect access onto the frontage road. And so together, the synergies of this property are significant to have that developed together. Now, just a word or two about the justifications for rezoning of the property as an RL property. The property, first of all, the property should be rezoned to accommodate the private property rights of the owners, of the DeVore family and of Symphony Homes. That's made more important and more appropriate in this case because the city's general plan supports, as one of its goals and objectives and policy directives, that supports the rezoning of this property based on its size into a straight RL zone. The general plan recognizes that the property is appropriate for that RL zoning. Third, the third justification, the city's thoughtful staff carefully reviewed the application and all of the available information and concluded and recommended in its reports to the Planning Commission and to the City Council that the rezoning to RL zone be granted. And reading the summary of the staff report, this again is just a couple of lines, but I quote, and this is from the minutes of the meeting before the Planning Commission. Staff finds the proposed amendment to be consistent with the goal, objectives, and policies of the general plan and harmonious with the overall character of existing development in the vicinity. Staff recommends the rezone. The fourth justification is the recommendation made by the city, or rather the Planning Commission, to this City Council. The Planning Commission also carefully reviewed the zoning application. It held a lengthy public hearing on the issue, considered all available information, and then, as you know, it recommended that the zoning be approved to RL zone consistent with the master plan. And just to give you a flavor of this, you've seen it, I'm sure, but quoting from the planning, or rather the Planning Commission minutes, the reasons for the action, the recommendation of the Planning Commission are these, quote, 1, the proposed amendment meets the requirements found in section 12-21-080, paren 4, paren E. 2, the proposed zone map amendment meets the goals and objectives of the general plan concerning neighborhood 4. And then it refers to section 12-480-5. And 3, adequate facilities are located within the subject property along Lund Lane. And it then refers to section 12-21-080, paren E, paren 5. And so for those reasons and others, this is an appropriate case for the granting of the zone, the rezone approval requested. Now finally, let me just talk to you about the benefits that would flow from this rezone. These are benefits not just for the developers or owners, but for the city and the community. And there are many benefits, but just to reduce it down to a manageable number, let me discuss 4 or 5. First, this rezone respects and protects bedrock private property rights. Second, granting this rezone ensures that this city council is acting with fundamental fairness in consideration of the private property rights of those being affected. Third, by granting the rezone, the city thereby avoids claims or concerns that its actions were arbitrary and capricious because of all of the reasons we talked about before, the justifications for the rezone. And it also demonstrates that the city is proceeding with fundamental fairness and properly balancing the rights of private property. Next, and this is really an important issue that I think the council has concerns about, granting this rezone actually helps solve some of the problems that have been raised by neighbors. And I have read through the transcript of some of the comments that were made in prior meetings. Two of the recurring themes are drainage and traffic. And just to touch on those for a minute. With respect to drainage, because, as I mentioned earlier, because this is not just an isolated parcel that's being developed like the Symphony Homes parcel in the middle of this. This is the entire swath of property, 17 acres, from Main Street to the frontage road, and allowing it to be developed as an aggregated parcel instead of having it developed as disconnected smaller parcels, allows the drainage problem to be dealt with from one side, the uphill side on Main Street, to the downhill side at the frontage road. In addition to that, the state code and the city ordinances and building standards now requires that drainage be dealt with not only by surface excavation, but also by a subsurface, an underground standing pipe system that takes water that drains down and transfers it from the property to the street. So it's removed from the property being developed. And so that is a requirement for the developer to comply with under the RL zone. And so the developer is willing to do that and would be required to do that under the appropriate codes. With respect to traffic, we've had discussions about that even tonight, and much of that is over my head. But thankfully we have engineers and others who understand those nuances. But the takeaway that I understand from the traffic analysis that's been done is that there will be additional cars on the roads in the vicinity of this neighborhood because there'll be some lots there. But the analysis under appropriate models that are approved by the engineering authorities indicates that there will be no significant impact to levels of service. And part of that is because, again, since this is being developed as one large footprint, one large property, it allows traffic to be diffused over 3 different access points or egress points. Another finding of the study, as I understand it, is that the least impacted access point, meaning the access point that's carrying the least amount of traffic generated, is the access point by the school, because of the other access points further west that would accommodate more traffic. In addition to that, most of the students living in this subdivision would be immediately proximate to the school. They would not even be separated from the school by a significant highway. Many would walk to school across the playground, which is adjacent to this property. The developer spoke with the school district, and the school district indicated that they have excessive capacity of approximately 200 slots. And they indicated that they would welcome these students, particularly because of their proximity. And the fact that they live so close and many could walk, that is a better way for the school to fill up to fill up the school with students, as opposed to perhaps having them bused in from another area where bused or driven in from another area where there is overcapacity. And finally, well, 2 other quick items. Another unique aspect of developing this property together is the diversity of lots. This property, the anticipated development, would be, again, consistent with the general plan, that the lots on the western side of the property would be similar in size to the pre-existing lots in subdivisions in that area. So they'd be approximately a quarter acre in size. The lots on the eastern edge of the property would be roughly similar in size to the lots on Main Street. And they'd be, in general, approximately a third acre in size. And so this diversity of lot sizes has a couple of advantages, one of which is significant, and that is it will help provide some more affordable housing. Now, I'm not using affordable in the sense of truly affordable housing, because there isn't much on the east side of the Wasatch Front that's really that affordable anymore, but these would be much more affordable than some of the other housing going in, and so it would provide an opportunity for families that can't afford the McMansion to still move in and have a lovely home in a nice city like Centerville. And the final one is this. The possibility of there is a possibility, again, because of the unique nature and diversity of lots of this property, to develop the entire property in one phase. The reason for that, in part, is because if it were all quarter acre lots, or if it were all larger lots, it would take some time for absorption. And so it would typically be done in phases. But because there's diversity in the sizes, the developer believed that there's a possibility here that they could develop the entire property in a single phase. And the benefit of that to the city and the community is that there isn't recurring construction impacts every time a new phase is undertaken. Instead, it would be done at one time, and then it's over. And so for a lot of reasons, there again, I come back to the phrase that this is a unique opportunity for the city and the community, for the developers, the property owners, and there's a unique synergy to allow this property to be developed as a single large parcel, as opposed to having piecemeal development that is disconnected and not as efficient in dealing with traffic or drainage or other issues. So thank you for your time and attention. It's been a pleasure to be with you again. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to respond to those or find others that can. Anything I can help? Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
I think there's going to be questions. I'm just not sure who's jumping in first.
Then don't leave, Kevin.
Hold on, Kevin.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to keynote this with just an interesting thing. You brought up, you were mentioning Municipal Title 10, Section 9A, 102.
Right.
And you've talked about providing fundamental fairness in land use regulation. Up there, sub-paren C, it says improve the morals, peace, good order, comfort, convenience, aesthetics of each municipality and each municipality's present and future inhabitants and businesses. Are those in mutual, are they mutually exclusive? How are they being serviced under this proposal?
Yeah, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. The statute does two things. It talks about the regulatory power of municipalities, and then it talks about these limitations or issues, at least, that the city should be careful about and concerned about in regulating property. And the two things that I mentioned were it should do so in a way that is fundamentally fair to property owners and in a way that balances the need for regulation with private property rights. But I think in further response to that question, both staff and the Planning Commission have considered whether this rezone to RL from the holding AL zone would be consistent with the requirements of the general plan and the needs of the city, and both concluded unequivocally that it would. And in fact, in the city's own application for zone amendments, it has a provision that says Approval standards are as follows. Is the proposal consistent with the goals and objectives of the general plan? Will it be harmonious with the overall character of the existing property? How will the change affect adjacent property? And is there adequate facilities and services in the intended area? And both, again, staff and the Planning Commission concluded and recommended to this body that all of those standards are satisfied in this particular situation.
Corey, was the traffic memo available to the Planning Commission?
I don't think the commission actually reviewed the traffic study. I think it was talked about, and I don't know if they had prepared it and said it was available, but I do not believe the planning commission reviewed the traffic study.
At this point, I have, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
At this point, I have a question for Lisa, and it was a question I was going to ask last time. And that is the appropriateness of considering the traffic study at this point in the process.
Well, at the rezone level, usually we look at the 4 factors that Mr. Anderson has discussed. One of those factors is the adequacy of the facilities. And so I think the staff and planning commission have said there's adequate facilities, meaning there are roadways within the area that can accommodate this type of traffic. But I think the public had raised the issue of traffic, and so the applicant responded with the traffic study. But I do think that given our ordinances and the 4 factors, the adequacy of the facilities is where we're slotting the discussion of the traffic study. But typically, you know, for instance, with the Hawks rezone, you know, or somewhere else where there really are no facilities at all, that might be a different issue.
And in response to that question, because it's a very good one, I think I agree with Lisa that typically drainage and traffic issues are issues that come up later in the process at the preliminary plat stage. Once an overview, a broad 30,000-foot determination is made that there are adequate facilities. In this case, though, even though that's true, we've wanted to advance the ball on that because there were some concerns raised by the public in the public comment session in prior meetings, and we just wanted to let them and you know that the drainage and traffic issues can be dealt with appropriately in this case. Thank you.
Councilman McEwen, you have more?
I don't want to hog the mic, I see.
No,
Robin
I
and
have,
Davenport.
I have some questions, and I have probably some, I would like to see this piece of property developed. I'd like to see it best for the property owners, the developers, and the neighbors. I totally agree with you on the lot size and how it will be developed more harmonious with the different size lots. But I'm always told when I go to these seminars on developing that not to approve anything that I'm not comfortable with the way it is being proposed. So for me, the only way we have any guarantee on those lot sizes would be is if it was to go to a PDO, because if we give you R1, we have no guarantee that we're going to get big lots at the top and small lots on the bottom, or that the first 2 big houses don't sell, so they all go to smaller lots, and it has to be done in 2 or 3 phases. So after listening to several citizens who have given us a lot of input, some of the things I'm looking at make me feel like maybe a PDO would be something that might be better for the neighbors, might be better for the developer and the city. When we talk about the general plan and be harmonious, yes, and we do have half-acre lots up there, but we also have a lot of quarter-acre lots. And our general plan does state for that area that we would like to keep some of that area rural, actually in bigger pieces, and I don't want to do that to the divorce. But, so here again, I might, instead of saying I'm not willing to do all of it in single-family, a PDO might make me feel more comfortable with knowing what I'm getting. The traffic study concerned me very much. I'll be really honest. I feel like you're trying to put the traffic out into other people's neighborhoods. I think if you're building the neighborhood, it needs to go straight to the frontage road. I realize that that's going to put a little more traffic on their road, but I feel like if you're coming in and you're building the neighborhood, and there is a easy access for you to handle your own traffic, you should handle your own traffic instead of trying to put it out into other neighborhoods. The drainage is a huge concern for me, and I realize this is probably not a zoning issue, but yet I don't want to zone it R1. I mean, right now it's quarter-acre lots, and I don't even know, I mean, that would even be, I mean, it's kind of scary. So I was up there today. I took some pictures. There were spots up there that looked like I could ride a watercraft on. And so when they've been coming in and telling us, you know, we've got drainage problems, I assumed if you dug 2 feet down, you were going to hit water. I realized that there's 2 feet of water above the ground. So we do have a huge drainage problem in that area. Talking about being fair, you know, we did have another rezone come in, and the neighbors came, and there was a lot of half-acre lots around there, and that zone was turned down. So I feel like we're being more than fair to be looking at, you know, the smaller lots. So I'm concerned about the traffic. Like I said, I loved what you said and your ideas. I hadn't thought about that with the different size lots, but the only way we get that guarantee of that is with a PDO. Like I said, our general plan, yes, but our general plan also turns around and says we want to keep some of North Centerville in more of a rural state. So, you know, it depends on who wants what in the general plan. So just putting that out there, that I can see where a PDO might be more beneficial to everybody, but I realize that that's not an option that we can force or ask for. But I think it might be something that would help everybody out.
Thank you for raising those, and let me just address them briefly. And I don't have the depth that some others in the development group have, and so I'll ask them to add comments too. But just briefly, with respect to the drainage issue, which you indicated is huge, I agree. I think that's a recurring issue with many people, and that's why we've kind of wanted to get that information out there. Because that's such a significant issue, I think it is a benefit to the city and the neighbors to allow this property to be developed as proposed as a single large consolidated or aggregated parcel, so that the drainage system can be dealt with as a cohesive issue, a cohesive system, as opposed to having different people coming in and developing little disconnected parcels that may not be efficiently connected together, or not as
I
efficiently.
agree with that.
And so if we really want to take care of drainage issues, I think the best way to do that is to have this developed as an aggregated parcel, to have a single drainage system that goes from one side of the property, the uphill side of drainage, and takes it all the way through to the downhill side of the drainage, as opposed to having, again, different parcels in different places trying to take care of their own systems. With respect to the traffic issue.
And Kevin,
yes.
Hold the thought for a second. As soon as you finish there, I want to hear from Kevin, and his response to the traffic study that you guys did, and also from our police
Yeah,
chief.
I'm interested to hear
In
that
that
as well.
regard.
So maybe I'll defer on the traffic. I think, again, we're trying to be proactive and helpful to the city with respect to traffic issues. Developing the parcel as a single unit allows traffic to be diffused over several access points, which again is helpful, I think, to the city, and it has a system. You mentioned the possibility of extending out to the frontage road. I think the developer would be interested in that as well. But I don't know. I think there may be something that some action the city would have to take to enable that. If not, that's something we could definitely talk about and work on, because we've had the same thoughts. Was there anything else you raised that, that you wondered about how do you ensure about lot sizes? Let me ask the developer, Bruce, I don't know if you have any comments you'd like to make on that issue?
You need to come up here.
Come on up to this one.
Question, and I think it gets in the heart of the matter. Do we want the city to have, you want the city to have greater say and greater assurance? And we understand that. But here, if we had a big square piece of property that was a certain kind of configuration, there are a lot of creative ways that you can develop it. Where this is so long and narrow, whether you go a PDO or we go the residential, the LR, what is it? Pardon? The RL. That main road that comes from Main Street that goes down, whether it connects to the frontage road or angles over, either way, that road's got to go in. And off of that road, there's only two options to access a little of the land, would be a little cul-de-sac, two little cul-de-sacs. There is not a way to get very creative with this. So the basic drainage system, the basic road configuration, the basic way the lots would lay out we're hemmed in by the shape of the property. We're greatly constrained by it. So there's not any creative solutions there. I think the drainage issue would be the same under either zoning. We have to drain that property, and we have to use upgraded and updated drainage standards to do it. We have to bring in the capacity to the rear of the lots to allow for the discharge of water off impermeable surfaces out the rear to go into a pipe system and out through the road. You can no longer leave it on the lots, and we get that, and we would engineer it that way under the direction of the city engineer. And then the question about the large lots and the small lots. I understand your concern about that. We won't be able to sell $1 million home that backs the freeway. It's not going to happen. And we only, when what we really have at the east end is an opportunity maybe to put in 10 to 15 larger lots. But as you come down and we get hemmed in, they will have to go to the smaller lots. And not all of those will have 3-car garages. Many of those smaller lots will only be able to have a 2-car garage. And that's why in these areas the home prices might be more in the 550 to 600 range, where on the east side they'd be up higher. I understand your concern. I don't know what guarantees you want, but we would be foolish to try to build $1 million homes next to the freeway. There's no market for it.
So in terms of those guarantees on that drainage issue, this is what I'm going to give you my general perception of what's happened in that area. Engineering has been done, drainage has been installed, and then you get into this arms race of defensive landscaping, where property owner modifications are making the systems ineffective in some areas, and then you end up with reoccurring issues. How would you potentially address that in your purchase contracts or otherwise to make sure that your engineered drainage system is still viable into the future?
Well, I can give you two answers to that. One is the first is when we install the system, and we're doing this in other cities now. We just haven't put a project in Centerville in the last few years. We're putting these rear yard drain systems in, and there's a standpipe. And when the city inspector comes out, I hope that they would look at the finished grade that we leave and all the water drains down. I'm not looking for more regulation, but every city's struggling with this exact issue. And what they have gone to is they have gone to a system that requires the citizens, when they landscape, to get an additional inspection, and they charge a fee to make sure that the people landscape to maintain that drainage. Beyond that, we can put things in the covenants, but there's not a policing authority if somebody came in, for instance, and built a shed and put a retaining wall in and blocked some drainage. But this is the point I want to make that's different. In the past, the lots were put in so that one lot bled water onto another lot, and it all went downhill. Those days are done. Each lot has to manage its own water, and each lot has its own standpipe. So technically, unless somebody really botches it, you can't block your neighbor's water because your neighbor's water goes to the spot, to the drain pipe, goes down underground and exits underground. And unless somebody gets careless and actually carves up the pipes that are 3 feet deep in the ground, they can't block it anymore because everybody's draining their own water through a pipe system. So the scenario that we've experienced even in Lexington Park, and you have in other areas of the city, should be managed by updated drainage standards. And we would expect you to hold us to them. We're not trying to shirk this responsibility. We would expect to do it, and that should be required.
That's helpful. For me, the issue on drainage is if we do end up with a property owner who is non-compliant and creates issues where they're not draining or they've significantly changed the grade, and it's dumping onto somebody else's property, what I want to avoid, and this is a little bit outside of the zoning discussion, but this is the theoretical. I have a disinterested homeowner who has good legal representation, who doesn't care that the person on the other side of the hill or that has been created, it's draining into their home or destroying their basement. That's that harmonious existence and that comfort of existing citizens. I do not want to disenfranchise anyone who's already there because somebody else comes in and makes a modification and destroys what otherwise would be considered a well-engineered drainage system. So that's my fear and my concern.
No, I understand this. I don't know if there's an absolute perfect guarantee. We will put restrictions in the covenants. The residents have to enforce those. The system should be installed properly. It should be managed by us and by the city. And when we've seen these go in, I'm not sure if you're going to get rid of 100% of the problems, but I think you can get rid of almost all of them because people honor the system and they drain into their pipes. We've seen it happen over and over again. They want to get rid of their water too. They're motivated to discharge their water. So the point though is that drainage system, whether you go the zoning that you're talking about where the city has a little more authority or not, that drainage system will be the same under either zoning. We have to drain it the same way. The zoning won't have anything to do with the drainage.
Agreed. It's just that if we head that direction, that's the next major item. So since it's already out on the table, we might as well address that in terms of that's going to be the next biggest concern.
We fully expect to be held accountable all the way through the process to make sure the project is done properly.
And the best part about YouTube is I've got you on camera saying you want to put it into the covenants that they don't modify or otherwise destroy the drainage system. That's fantastic.
We can put that, we would put that in.
We have
we already do.
Big concerns because of other developments in that area where there's been concerns brought up about the drainage system.
Yes, well, and that's, I think, what Kevin alluded to. When we put in Lexington Park, that playground that was there? They would saturate water that playground, discharge all that water underneath. And by the way, the school had hit some springs. And guess what they did? They didn't drain their springs to the road. They tried to dump them to the edges of the school property. And we're discharging water from the playground under current regulations illegally onto what was the Rigby farm. Well, the Rigbys didn't care, but it's created some problems. So one of the advantages of this, because we can handle the drainage from east to west, we can collect all of that and run it into one system, and we don't have a school or others around discharging water in ways that we have no control over.
Well, thanks for that clarification. Good to hear outside the discussion for tonight, but great to hear.
Okay. So Councilwoman Meekum brought up drainage and traffic. We heard for your traffic study. We have in our public information some email responses from our city engineer and from our police force on that traffic study. And so let's hear from our staff. Kevin, you want to go first? Just kind of expand on your email and whatever else on your mind as far as the traffic goes.
Yes. So in general, the city has 2 arterials. Main Street is considered an arterial in the area. Frontage Road is considered an arterial. And then 400 West is considered a collector street. So in short, I guess the infrastructure for transportation is there. The level of service, I would agree, is going to be
minimally impacted. We've talked about this in work sessions before, but our main concern traffic-wise is Parish Lane, the frontage road intersection and the Marketplace intersection. Those intersections are currently already failing or will fail regardless of this development or not, but just due to build out in North Centerville and South Farmington. And so those projects have been funded. They're on the WFRC schedule for 2 to 3 years from now. We're trying to get those projects maybe traded so that we can do the Marketplace intersection first and then the 400 West intersection. But traffic-wise, I would say that's those two intersections are my main concern. And then, of course, the interchange. We've been told that might be 10 to 15 years from now. So that's kind of a rough time frame for I-15 Parish Lane interchange.
Thanks, Kevin.
So, if I can ask Kevin a question?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
There is you say the infrastructure exists, and yet comments from citizens indicates that it doesn't, that it's not controlled, and that we have inadequate. And so there's a basic conflict with those that live there and experience the traffic, and what both the traffic study and what you would say. Help me understand.
Yeah, so level of service is based on delay, so expected delay. Usually it's at the intersections, so when we rebuilt the Main Street and Parish Lane intersection, that was level of service D or F at the time because people were having to wait at that intersection for several, maybe 2 to 3 light cycles. And so when we talk about level of service, we're not usually talking about, let's say, the traffic flow north to south on Main Street. It flows fairly well. What we're talking about is how long does it take somebody to get into that flow of traffic. And if it starts to exceed a certain number of minutes, that's when the traffic studies indicate that those intersections are failing. So I mean, we could study, you know, there was a signal put at Chase Lane in Maine for that reason. So if there's any intersections in the city where we feel like they're failing or they're getting to that a low level of service, we ought to study those intersections. And one that was studied fairly recently was Porter Lane and 4th West. It was getting to be, you know, there was some concern there that people were having to wait too long, and then they were dashing out into the traffic. Porter Lane and Main Street was one that was looked at. But if there are intersections that we feel are, you know, people are having to wait way too long, we ought to look at those.
So 4 years ago, approximately, 4.5 years ago, I was sitting right down here while we were told that there weren't any problems at Porter and 4th. And now there are, and
well,
as
Porter
a result
and 4th.
of, well, let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
As a result of those, what was then known as the Hafoka property ultimately was approved. But people in the area were confident that it was going to be a problem. And based on my own experience, it is a problem. And so, you know, on the one hand, everybody, all the traffic studies say, oh, no problem, we can handle it. But for the residents, that's not factually what they're experiencing.
Yeah, it is definitely a perception, and that they're waiting. When that intersection was studied, it was not determined that a signal would be warranted at 400 West and Porter. So that would be the next step, is if you had an intersection that was level of service maybe C or D,
And it was getting to where it was, then you can start to warrant a signal, instead of I think that's just a two-way stop, right? So Porter Lane's stopping, but Fourth West isn't. So we could look at the data for that intersection or for some of the others, but at the time, the data didn't support an intersection, a signalized intersection.
I'd like to jump in here. I'll look forward to hearing from Police Chief as well, but that word data is so important, and not to discredit any of our feelings as citizens, right? But we all want less traffic where we live. And so it's so essential to base these decisions, these rezone decisions that we're making on data, on standard protocols for measuring. And the other thing that I'd mention is that every single one of our neighborhoods that we live in that was built increased traffic in the area. And so, over time, Centerville now has more stop signs than it used to, more stop lights than it used to, because we moved in. And so it's difficult to make a decision saying, well, it will change traffic.
Mayor, if I could just make one clarification. Sure. Kevin, if you recall, if I remember correctly, when we did the 400 West and Porter for the Hofoka development, it didn't warrant improvements at the intersection. The problem was, if I recall, the RDA did a study, and it was actually back into the commercial area that the signalization needed to occur to open up the capacity. So the signal wasn't at Porter, it was back at the townhomes place. What's the road going into that?
Yeah, at one time we studied, was it Bolano Way?
Bolano Way was where the interruption needed to occur in order for the flow to be corrected.
Yes, into the Florentine townhomes. That was an area that was studied as well. But
so I just wanted to show that just because there's an impact, you have to also source where it's coming from and where it's controlled. And it wasn't 400 and West and Porter itself that was the problem. It was the commercial traffic back further that needed to be interrupted to open up that flow.
Well, and Tammy, I'm with you on the idea of data, and that's why I was asking the questions about what's the formula, what manuals are we doing to derive this, because everything else is Kentucky windage. To me, does this have a peak hour? Yes, it does. Does it also have peak hours that are just as bad? Anytime there is a talent show, whatever else, that street is just as packed, if not more so, with every grandma for miles around that's on Main Street. So if I were to take this data that's here, or this estimation, and I handed it to a resident who lives along 400 West, they're going to tell me straight out that when one of those events is taking place, it won't be 40% of the traffic dumping onto Main Street. It'll be coming out 400 West, and they'll be expecting to do similar speeds because they've lost the time they didn't make doing 40 miles an hour on Main Street. So I canvassed that area a lot this summer and fall. That's the chief complaint that I heard is that we have speed issues there now, and that's going to get worse. And as you may or may not recall, we had several mothers here who'd had children hit in that area on their way to school or otherwise. So it's a tough situation. And Tammy, I'm in agreement with you that data is what's going to drive this. So I guess I'll just shut up and let the chief add to what Kevin's saying. But I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how to dial this in tight enough that makes it reasonable, that it meets a scientific engineering standard, isn't Kentucky windage, and somewhat overcomes the objections of the perceptions of citizens. So if we get that, we're all retiring, because that's a magic formula no one's going to get.
Kevin, can you address what Paul Peterson said regarding the Institution Transportation Engineer study and the Wasatch Front Regional Trip Connector that Councilwoman Meekum brought up? Are you familiar with those? And
I'm not super familiar. I would have to do a little bit of research and check with another traffic engineer to verify.
Also, if it would be allowable, I did email, I looked it up, took screenshots, and emailed that to Leah so she could put it up on the screen. We have those numbers if anyone cares to look at them tonight.
thanks. More for Kevin, or are you ready for the police chief? Zan?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Paul Child, the police chief. So let me just preface this. I've been out of the country for the last several days and haven't had a chance to look at the study. until just now while we were sitting here. And so I had Lieutenant Robinson take a look at it and give you the feedback that he gave regarding it. But I have, prior to leaving, I did look at the situation over there and the design of the proposed development. And this area, I attended the public hearing as well when this was discussed. This area has been an area that I have been monitoring for a few years now, specifically 2025 North and 4th West and Main Street and 2025 North. The intersection at 4th West and 2025 North has been the source of multiple complaints over the years, specifically to kids going to and from school in that intersection. It is a 4-way stop, and we did some restriping of the crossing there to try to mitigate some of the issues that we were running into, so that kids weren't crossing east to west on the south side of the intersection and coming into conflict with traffic that was making a left-hand turn there. And that's helped to alleviate some of the issues there. But as we've been monitoring it, and I've had officers over there monitoring it, recently I've asked an officer to give me some counts. I haven't had a chance to get with that officer yet to see what he's come up with how many kids are crossing in that intersection. But that was some issues that were brought up by the public during that hearing, was the amount of kids going through that intersection and some of the perceived dangers there. This has been an intersection that's been on my mind for the last 3-4 years, monitoring that. We have, in order to really handle that intersection, if we were to put a crossing guard there, we'd have to have 2 crossing guards in order to handle, because you're crossing 3 legs. And so we've tried to come up with some other ideas. Again, we did some restriping there, did away with the piano board crossing, the school crossing on the south side of the intersection to help alleviate that conflict there. I've been working with the PTA at the school to see if we can put together a safety program there, a safety patrol. And that had some starts, but it wasn't, there wasn't follow through with it. It's one of those things when you're using volunteers, it's kind of hard to make that happen. So as I've been evaluating that intersection, I do think that it's something that we need to look at in this next budget year, providing some staff there to provide 2 crossing guards to help with the kids, with the existing traffic and the existing kids going to school there. Most of your traffic going through that intersection after school or before school is east to west, or it'll be going from that intersection headed south. Since there's very few homes on the north side of the intersection, there's really not a lot of vehicle traffic coming out of there. So that leads to what the impact of this development would have for that intersection. One of the things that we proposed in looking at this is a cut-through access from the new development directly into the school yard that would allow for kids to walk directly right onto the schoolyard, which we have at Jenny P. Stewart off of 1250 North and 225 West. I think that would basically handle all the kids that live on the proposed development. They could walk straight up there and not even go through the intersection at 2025 North and make direct access. It would also make it easier for the kids, so that if you're a kid that lives in your back door is right where the school is, instead of having to walk up to Main Street over to 2025 and down, you can just straight on through. So I think that would help with any concerns about an impact on the intersection there at 2025 North with kids walking to and from school. Even without the cutoff, the main issue there would be kids on the west side of 400 West, because they would have to cross the east to west crossing. The kids living east of 400 West would just make a corner turn there without having to go across any roadway. As I looked at the traffic counts and the number of vehicle travel that was projected there, I was a little suspicious as to the amount of the numbers. I felt that they were kind of low. The peak times, I think, are accurate as far as when the peak times would be based on some other studies we've done along 4th West. So I think the peak times are probably the times that we're looking at. But I was a little suspect, as I think you were, as far as the numbers that were being projected. I think they're probably going to be a little higher. I don't know what that is. I think what we're looking at is your traffic is going to be in some different categories. And as Councilmember McEwen mentioned, it kind of depends on what's going on at that particular time or that particular day. But on average, I think you're going to have your commuter traffic that's going to be going to work and probably leaving, 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:30, whatever, to go to work. From that new development, I would anticipate probably most of the traffic is going to want to make it to the freeway, I suspect. So for me, that would be, if I lived on that street, I'd want to go straight west and go down to where the knuckle is that connects on to 725, the existing road 725, go over to 2025 west and to the frontage road so I could access the freeway. To me, that would be the quickest, easiest route to take to the freeway if I lived on that road. Which means that 725 west, which now is just a dead-end street, is going to see probably a dramatic increase from what's happening there now. I think that's maybe the nature of the beast, because it does have a dead-end street that eventually will connect to something. So in looking at that, I did recommend or was contemplating a recommendation to connect it directly to the frontage road so that you wouldn't have that additional traffic making that dogleg over and going west on 25 North. Now that could create some issues going down the road for further developments to the north, because there is a narrow piece of property there to the north of what's being proposed that the general plan calls for 2150 North to go down and connect to the frontage road there. And that could cause us an issue of having two roads very close to each other that connect on to the frontage road, which could be an issue. But as I understand it, the owners of that property, that's maybe generations away before that would be developed. At least that's what is being said. So I think there's some argument there to make the direct connect onto the frontage. The downside of that may be that could become somewhat of a thoroughfare for traffic going east to west from Maine to the frontage, and be a kind of a straight shot, so we might have some issues with speed along there. So those are just some of my thoughts on that. Going back to 2025 North, I know during the public hearing comment time, there was a lot of comments made about the speed on 2025 North. I've directed my staff to put a monitoring device on 2025 North. I just got back this evening. I don't know if it's been up, but I anticipate it's been up, monitoring traffic. It's a device that is not really visible, so most people won't even know it's there. But so it's collecting this data without people really knowing it, so it's more accurate data, it's more raw data, so people aren't adjusting their speeds because there's a sign there that says you're going whatever miles an hour. And it'll also give us the traffic count. So I'm looking forward to getting the numbers on that.
So that has both speed and volume?
Yes. The comments about to my knowledge, there's only one child that was hit on 2025 North, west of 400 West. It was not due to speed. It was due to inattentive driving and a child that quickly ran across the road. So we actually have video of that entire accident. We've had people examine it, and speed was not a factor in that crash or in that accident. So based on the concerns that were raised during the public hearing, we've been trying to monitor that a little bit better. I have asked for additional enforcement on that road as the officers are available. To the back to the categories of traffic. So you're going to have your commuter traffic. I think most of them are going to go west, go down to the frontage road, and try to get to the freeway that way. If they're going to go to Dick's Market, I would anticipate they'll probably go to Main Street and north. You got your high schoolers, junior high school. You know, high schoolers, they could go along 4th West, any one of the 3 roads, really. Just kind of depends on personal preference and who they're going to pick up on the way to school. Junior high school, same thing. So I think with the elementary kids, if we can get that cut through, that'll alleviate any issues there. So I think that's everything that I've got. I do want to say that I've spent a lot of time with the crossing guard at 2025 North and Main, and observed the queue that happens there, and the traffic volume on Main Street there. There is a fair amount of traffic going on Main Street already. Most of it's going southbound. But the delays created by the kids crossing isn't egregious. It's not dramatic. So don't see too much of an issue there.
Can I interject with a question for Lisa? So all this has been fascinating about the existing problems in the area. How do we translate that, if at all, to the question of, besides a traffic study that's provided by a professional engineer, if we have an area that already has existing problems, but the traffic study says this won't exacerbate these existing problems, you know, to a degree worse than blank.
Yeah, again, at the rezone level, we're just trying to look at a global sense of whether the facilities are adequate. We typically don't get into this level of the traffic, but again, it was brought up by the public. Developers are not expected to solve existing problems. So I think that we will look to the traffic engineers to help us understand the adequacies of the intersections and the facilities that are already there. Obviously, developers can pay their proportionate fair share of system improvements, but again, most of the roads are already here, and they will be putting in a significant number of infrastructure within the project area to handle the traffic as well. So, but many of those issues can be handled at the development stage during subdivision and platting.
So Tammy, am I kind of detecting you're ready for a motion? I'm just asking, because you said it's been fascinating, but it sounded like you're done with the fascinating work.
We're just diving really deep for the level that we're at, and have spent a lot of time.
So
I did have one
go
concern.
ahead.
We did offer to those who were here last time, and any that they knew, that we would accept public comment. I noticed that I received an email at 5 o'clock today, or thereabouts, with a lot of that public comment, and I have not had a chance to review that. And I don't know that I feel comfortable voting on it when I haven't reviewed what I told them I would review. And I understand that part of that is the city's fault.
I agree with that, and I do think our city website was not collecting the emails for a couple of days. So I do think we owe it to our citizens to keep that open for a while, because some of them don't realize that their email didn't come through. So we need enough time for the word to get out that they're going to have to resend those emails.
I don't have a problem procedure, because I hear what you're saying and I agree with you. The issue is we made a commitment that public comment would stay open in email until this meeting, and that information would be posted as part of the public packet. It's not there.
No, we didn't say this meeting.
No, we said till Friday.
Friday.
On
Friday,
yeah,
Friday,
when the
Friday.
website
Sorry.
wasn't
Yeah,
collecting it.
thanks for the clarification, but the intent was, as far as I understood it, is that material that was being provided by the public would be in the packet and available for public inspection.
Last Friday.
Yeah, so that is to me, that's the issue of concern, is that.
Right, and it
that
couldn't be
commitment
because we
wasn't
hadn't
made.
got it.
So the question is, are you asking to reopen that comment period
Yes.
with the understanding that whatever meeting this goes to, it is available for public inspection as we had requested last time?
Well,
I think
and
that's the fair thing.
the emails that came in at 5 o'clock today, did they come in because people were after the deadline, or did they come in because they were delayed because we had problems with our system? I mean, do we know?
So we had issues with our system. You can do a web submission, and they were being, I don't know if they were being bounced back or they just weren't being transmitted to us to inspect. So the deadline had come and gone. We didn't have anything. We realized we were informed that those weren't being pushed forward. And it's not just our website. It was a few. I'll let Leah, if you want to take it from here, since you handled it great.
I just want to clarify that the email I sent you today was public comment that I received in my email after 5 o'clock on Friday, up to when I sent it to you today, but I hadn't received any today. All of that was through yesterday, maybe this morning. I think I may have received a couple. So none of them came in as late as 5 o'clock today. It was just anything we received after I left the office 5 o'clock on Friday.
But you can confirm we had an issue where people were.
We had an issue, yes,
Okay.
and then we got it out, and emails came, a lot of them came, which are in the packet.
So the ones that are included in your packet were in your packet. Those were received by 5 o'clock or so on Friday. So those that you received in an email today were received after 5 p.m. on Friday. Now, if
But
you
there's-
recall, the deadline was 12 p.m. on Friday, and we received quite a number of them after that deadline.
But there's no way to know what we received prior to that while the website wasn't working. So as the word has started to get out to the citizens that the website didn't work, they were giving comment and it wasn't being received, they may or may not have made an additional effort and coincided with the website working and gotten it to us by the deadline.
We don't know exactly if there were any that didn't make it through, but as Leah stated, we did receive quite a number of emails shortly after the website was repaired.
So I had several people calling me, telling me that they were sending the emails and they were coming back. They weren't being accepted. That's when I called Leah and let her know that we had a problem with our website. So that's how we found out that there was a problem. So I do think there were people's emails that were bounced back to them.
So I'm prepared to make a motion, but the problem I have is if we were to say, and this is not the motion, but if we said, all right, we're leaving the electronic public comment period open until, pick a date. If we're shutting this off for the first meeting in January, you're picking a time where you're going to have low staff. You're also going to have a lot of people out of town. Is it really effective to continue electronic comment, or would it be sufficient to take what has come in today, add that to the public record, and then have that available next time? I'm asking. I'm not trying to go one way or another.
It's my opinion that we owe it to the citizens to still have the right to, yes, it might be their busy time, but if it's important to them, they'll get their emails in.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion, and if I hear.
I guess
from
let's
staff-
finish fleshing it out a little bit. I'm still trying to decide. Do we think there's still more emails out there, or between what Leah provided from yesterday, from the weekend and yesterday, does that clean it up?
That's the I don't know part of it. I think if we're going to go ahead and say those get wrapped into the publicly available documentation, it won't hurt us to leave a window open
for a little bit longer.
My concern would be is making sure that whatever that window is, that it's staff is going to be able to cover it and it will end up in the packet on time. So like last time we picked a deadline with the intent that everything would show up in the packet. So if we were to say something to the effect of we were going to do this again, but we are shutting down public comment on January 1?
I wouldn't go that long. If you're going to do anything, I'd go through Friday.
this
Yeah.
Friday. That's what I would say.
I also just wanted to add that any email that came to my email, I made sure that I responded to that email to let them know that it had been received after the problem we had had. So if there's somebody out there who didn't get that response, or I made sure that they knew, so that because of the problem that we had, they had been received.
So let me try this on for motion and we'll see what happens. I'm going to motion that we table this until the first regular scheduled meeting in January, and we will accept electronic public comment until 5 p.m. on December 20th on this matter. Does that give enough time?
I'd second that.
We have a motion.
Is that a motion or is that a trial?
That's the trial motion to see if it gets a second.
I would be willing to second that.
Okay. And of course, the intent is that everything received ends up in the public packet.
So that means we have a motion with a second. Do we have further discussion? Okay, if not, then we'll take a vote, starting with Councilman Ince.
Aye.
Aye.
I guess we're going that direction then.
Which way are we going?
Come to the right from Councilman Ince.
Okay.
Aye.
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 Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Thank you for your research,
I think,
your input.
I think we probably ought to at least apologize to those who were hoping for a decision tonight. It was not anyone's intent. There are things that happen in life, so I at least apologize.
And I'll second what Bill is saying, and this is not meant to be a procedural maneuver to delay things. In that whole being equitable, we cannot disenfranchise anybody, and where we had made a commitment that that would be part of the public record, we're obligated to do that.
All right, thank you. Let's move to item number 3. This is the gun range lease agreement. We're looking at consider approval of amendment number 2, the gun range lease agreement, authorizing renewal of the gun range lease for 5 years. Lisa, were you going to talk on that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is Lisa's baby.
Thank you. We have an agenda item tonight to approve the amendment number 2 to the gun range lease amendment, lease agreement. The city owns some property up on the hillside, and as you know, we have leased a portion of that property to the Centerville Small Arms Association to operate a gun range up on the hillside. We've been doing that for many, many years. And so we renegotiated the lease back in 2013, and it was a 5-year lease. It was intended to have a second 5-year term, but at the time that it was brought back for renewal, the city was in the middle of studying the hillside for recreational purposes and doing our Foothills Master Plan revisit. So at that time, the council just approved a 1-year lease extension to allow us more time to study the foothills. I think at this time, staff has met with the Small Arms Association. We've talked about a number of issues in the lease that we would like to continue to work with them on, such as the signage and the road, other access issues. But at this time, staff is recommending to approve the Small Arms Association's request to extend the lease for another 5 years. We think that that's a reasonable thing to do at this time, and staff will work with them throughout the year to address some of the roadway issues, but I think those are issues that are going to take longer than we have, since this lease does expire the end of this year. So with that, the Small Arms Association does have a number of representatives here. I don't know if Jim Stevens might be the first one to address the council, but if you'd like to give them an opportunity as well to respond to their application. But staff is recommending approval of the second amendment to the lease agreement.
That worked out on 2 levels, you know that.
Thanks for the introduction. So, gun range, give us your best representative.
Mayor Wilkinson, staff, I want you to know how much we appreciate you. I'm Jim Stevens, the president of the Centerville Small Arms Association. That gun range has been up there since 1965. That's before some of you were born, maybe. It's been there a long time, and I'd like to let you know what an asset that is, not only to our own city, but Chief, how many other cities have signed an agreement with us to use that range? 5 or 6? Several other cities do not have access to a gun range like that, and so they've had to make an agreement through our police department so that they could have their officers qualified to do their job protecting their citizens the way our officers protect us. I'd like to express my thanks to our Chief of Police because he's been a tireless supporter of the gun range. Do you have any questions? I know that our city attorney was actually up there shooting some of the police weapons one time. She didn't really like it very much, but she did really quite well. And I think council member, I can't see your name there. McEwen, you've been up there?
I've been up there a few times, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that council member Ince is a member of the Small Arms Association.
Does that mean
I'd
I need to
invite all of
abstain?
you to join, mainly because in order to be the president of the gun range, you have to be a Centerville resident, and I'm getting old. So we'd like to have you go ahead and support us in this lease. The staff and city manager has worked tirelessly to provide us with a nearly seamless transition from the old lease into the new one. And based on their recommendation, I can't complain. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you. All right, if no questions, do we have a motion on this?
I would make a motion that
It's
we
faster on the draw.
approve the
Sorry.
extension of the gun lease.
Second.
Or of the small arms lease for another 5 years.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, starting with to my left and going right with Councilwoman Fillmore.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. All right, let's go to item number 4. This is adopting our annual meeting schedule for 2020.
Oh, before we go there was that public comment related to the mitigation number and trying to drop that as far as how much money was being spent on mitigation up there at the range. Do we have any idea what we're currently doing in terms of mitigation efforts and what that's costing?
So the mitigation fund is actually, we're not doing any mitigation right now, but the terms of the lease talk about, they put the obligation to mitigate the land, to take the lead content out at the end of the lease, and that obligation is on the association. So as we were talking in renegotiating the lease in 2013, we came up with a game plan, which is basically they're going to prepare a plan at that time using the most recent up-to-date technology to remediate the property, and then the city has the right to approve that plan. But we wanted to make sure that when that time comes, they actually have the funds to accomplish the remediation. So we agreed that they would pay $800 a year into that remediation fund. So the idea is at the end of the long-term lease, there will be sufficient funds there. And those funds are just to remediate. If there's anything left over, the association gets it. If it requires more, then the association has to make up the gap. So right now, when we did enter into that lease renegotiation in 2013, they actually submitted $1,000, but since then they have contributed $800 a year. So I think we currently have $5,000 prior to the 2019. It's due by the end of the year, as well as their insurance certificate evidencing $3 million worth of coverage. So we'll see those by the end of the year. But we have $5,000 in there right now. My response, I think, is to allow staff to look into that, you know, to get an idea. I'm not inclined to say we don't need that anymore, but at some point, maybe there's some negotiating to say we think we have a sufficient amount, because they also do require membership dues and things like that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Do we have any kind of a feel for what that number would be to remediate the property?
Well, that's where I want to go back and look at the notes from 2013 to see if there were any figures, but obviously that's going to change over time, and,
Sure.
you know, it might actually increase, or, you know, depending on what the approach will be. So that's where I'm saying I think staff has to have a better idea of the ballpark number to know if we're even halfway there or sufficient. I don't know.
All right, thanks.
With that, then I would propose that we not respond to that public request and continue with the 800.
Yeah, to me, it was just a point of clarification.
I understand,
Yeah.
I think
No,
at this point,
I think we've at least addressed it, so.
Yeah, and it would require a lease amendment anyway, so that is a specific term of the lease, so after staff analyzes it, if, you know, if they want to bring that to you, we could, but, yeah, at
I
this
would
point.
want to direct staff to look into that, because it could be that it's a good number, it could be that it's too much, it could be that it's too little. Because really, at the end of the day, the remediation is going to have to be done, and it's a very difficult situation if the organization in charge of it needing to be done has a huge lump sum they have to come up with all of a sudden, right? So.
And a big part of it will determine on what level of remediation are we looking for. I've worked on brownfields quite a bit, and we could be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but that's if you're
Right.
trying to put it in residential use, or you could be talking about.
And are we clear about that? in the
Yes,
Right, so
that was
that's-
what we renegotiated in the lease. We
Yeah.
talked a lot about what level the remediation would have to go to, and it is not for residential, it was merely residential. So that was a compromise at the time, I mean, for recreational.
We know you said.
Recreational purposes, so, yeah, it's not the highest standard.
So again, there is also grant funding we could possibly pursue to assist with whatever that is, but I wouldn't want to bank on that. But yeah, so I would like to look into that as well, since I do have it.
Yeah.
That's at the close of operations.
Right,
Right. Which at least isn't for 5 more years,
right,
possibly longer.
right.
All right, item number 4 is adopting the annual meeting schedule for 2020. Obviously, the Open Meetings Act requires that we hold regular meetings and that we provide an agenda over for the next, for our meetings for the next year. So that's resolution number 2019-27, which is showing that.
Motion to adopt 2019-27 as recorded.
Question.
Click.
Go ahead.
This last year, we moved the first meeting in November off of Election Day. Next year, it doesn't move off of Election Day. Was there a reason that we changed it up? I actually, in terms of the national election, would prefer to see us move. In terms of the local elections, would have preferred not to see us move. Not that what I believe it matters, but.
Yeah, yeah, we're thinking that it's not a municipal election year, but you can certainly change it if you'd like. Now would be the time to do so.
Does anybody else feel the way I do?
Well, the motion isn't seconded, so let's make the change and.
Okay, I would
Yeah, I-
propose a change to George's motion that we adopt a schedule other than November 3, which we move to November 4.
I could second that.
Motion is second, discussion?
Do we know when the caucus meetings will be held? Because that frequently conflicts with our thing as well. I don't know
Good
the
point.
date of that off the top of my head.
It's usually, if it conflicted, it would be the March 17th meeting, wouldn't it? Isn't that usually the third week of March?
I don't
Caucus
know.
meetings?
I'll find out. Let's see. It'll be Tuesday, March 3rd.
Oh, it's the first week this year.
Well, that's 2 dates we need to move then.
Everything's earlier this year, the primaries in June.
At least Google tells me that's when the Democratic Party is doing. I assume that would be all parties.
They were on different dates last year.
Were they?
They usually are on different dates.
Okay.
So you need to check.
That's the only thing that came up, so I'll have to search again.
I think, yeah, that's important, that, so the tricky thing is there's another party doing it on March 4th, right?
Yeah.
Right, if we're going to move it for one party's caucus, we can't not move it for another.
Right.
So we better find them all.
How assumptive of us.
So we don't know when the Republican is?
I'm looking for
I'm
it
not
right now.
seeing it.
Yeah, in my opinion, caucus night is much more the reason to move. I personally think with the move towards mail-in voting, I don't, you know, I don't have a problem with moving it, but I don't see the need to. But caucus night.
You don't stay up and watch the returns as they come in by?
But it's not a party for me, no, but, but caucus night, definitely.
Yep. I'm not seeing a date right off. For
It looks like that caucus night is the 3rd for
March.
Republicans. Mm-hmm.
So would you like to
Okay,
move
so
that
we-
meeting
It is
to
a
Yes,
Super
please.
Tuesday with Utah in it.
Wednesday, March 4th?
It is, I get it 3rd as well, too.
So that's March 4th and November 4th?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
I would amend my motion to include March 4th.
Second that.
All right. We got a motion and a second. Let's do a vote. Councilwoman Ivy,
aye.
going to the right.
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Item number 5, this is an appointment to South Davis Sewer District Board. There is a need for a closed session tonight. I have done some research, and we could, as far as talking about a particular individual, we could also move that to the closed session as well, too, where I could present that, if that is acceptable to everyone.
So if you'd like to talk about that in the closed session, I would just suggest that you table that item.
Okay, that's what I'm saying, yeah, we'll table that item, okay?
Table it to next meeting even.
All right,
No, we'll just table it to after the closed session. You can come out of the closed session and
Or
vote on it.
either, I would be flexible just in case you're not ready,
Yeah,
but.
I mean,
Didn't I see something that had to be done by the end of the year?
Well, all
I
of
think
these
it's
are supposed-
January.
I think it's January 4th, which is,
and all of these are supposed to be done by the end of the year, but they usually include provisions that say, but the person in the position keeps representing until the replacement
until their
is.
successor is.
we are going to have a serious, on January 7th, discussion about other committees and positions as well, too.
So that might make sense anyway.
Yeah. I think since it's not a public hearing item, you can just table it and then we'll bring it back when appropriate.
Okay?
So, okay, are we tabling this for the remainder of the meeting, or tabling it to bring it back? That's the part I'm confused on. Which we
Well,
doing?
Lisa's saying we don't have to specify, we can just table it since it's not public hearing.
We can just table it all until our January 4th meeting.
So if you want to come into another session, we can.
Okay, I'm going to motion that we table it until January 4th.
January 7th.
7th, sorry.
Sorry, that was me.
4th is a
My bad.
Saturday.
Well, I was making
We
it
could-
coincident with the
sorry.
term, but yeah, no, I don't want to come in on a Saturday either, so.
So we have a motion to table till January 7th. Second?
Second.
Okay. Do I need a roll call on this one? Yes, you'd like me to do them. Councilwoman Ivy?
Aye.
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 That motion passes 5-0. Item number 6, minutes review and acceptance. This is from the December 3rd, 2019 joint work session with the tree board and December 3rd, 2019 city council meeting.
I was on the joint work session. There were some comments made late in the meeting, one by Scott and one by Gary, about the inappropriateness of trees in the park strip. Gary said flat out that it was not his opinion that trees belonged in park strips, and Scott said that if there actually were utilities in the park strips, that would be considered a conflict in his mind. And neither of those comments made it into the minutes, and I'd like to see that fixed.
Good catch, thank you.
Yeah, that is a good.
We have the ability to get that right by listening back to it, Leah? Okay. Let's get it right, and as the audio will show, okay?
So then, do you want to table the minute approval pending those amendments?
Yes, I would like to table the work session minutes until we've gotten those straightened out.
Okay, so we're tabling the work session minutes. What about the city council meeting minutes?
I'd make a motion to approve the city council meeting minutes as they are prepared, although I didn't catch the other one, so maybe somebody should look again.
Do you want to be safe and just table both of them?
No, not really, but.
So is the motion to accept the city council?
The city council meeting.
Unless we want to elaborate on the recent meeting with UTA, because that was a little bit of a heated exchange under the city manager's report.
I don't recall that exchange at all.
Well, hence the minutes, right?
I second the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Do we have anyone that wants to, has a city council report for us
Did
tonight?
we vote on the motion to table those?
We did not.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. The tabling of December 3rd, let's vote on that one. So do we have,
There wasn't a second yet.
okay, we had a motion.
I move that we table the work session minutes from December 3rd.
Second that.
We have motion to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, city council reports. Anyone that wants to report on any of our committees or anything? Okay. We'll move on to mayor's report. I can discuss things in the closed session, so we'll move on from mayor's report as well, too. City manager's report.
Just briefly, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I been reflecting on this past year, and first of all, I just want to thank all the staff publicly for all their support. I've been here now almost 9 months, which is pretty fascinating to think about. Great staff here at Centerville. I've really enjoyed being here and also working with you, Mayor and Council. There's a lot of going on in Centerville, and I've really enjoyed the projects that we have and the things that we're doing, and I still hope for the best in the future. I do need to apologize. I do not have your Christmas gift.
You're
Been
not
a
going to
little.
say that pictures of your new baby.
Yeah, that was your Christmas gift to us.
Right.
I can show some more for you up on the screen if you'd like. We had some professional.
I'm sure you can.
We had some professional ones done. So anyway, I appreciate all that you do to support myself and the rest of the staff as well. And just an FYI to you, Thursday I'll be going out. I'll be out of the office again for a week or two. I'll be having knee surgery. My ACL graft failed, and so I need to have it done again on my right knee. So this will be my third ACL reconstructive surgery. So pretty excited
Do you
about
need a
that.
new doctor?
No, well, this is the new doctor, so highly recommended by Councilmember Meekum. So, but with that, are there any questions for me this time? All right, thank you.
Did everybody get the letter signed so it can get out?
Oh, I need to sign it. I did not.
Thank you for the reminder. Yes, please stop by Leah's office.
I think
Sign
she
that letter.
has it.
Do you have a letter passed down?
She's on top of it.
It's in the stack, just that.
And then I would motion that we adjourn the city council to convene a closed session to discuss character and competency of an individual as allowed by state law with no intent to return to the city council meeting.
Second.
We have motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? City council meeting adjourned. Can we take a 3-minute bathroom break quick?